This is Twit.
Russell, you wrote a piece entitled, "We've been blaming violence on video games for 20 years, and it's still BS." Can you explain the essence of your piece? What makes it BS?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a conversation that has been had out in public for a very long time now. This started back when Mortal Kombat first came out in 1998, and the violence inherent in that game was something that upset people who had never seen content like that before, and naturally assumed that there must be some sort of connection between that kind of violence and some of the violence they were seeing in the news, on television, or in print, and so. Some research was done, some accusations were made that the violence that we were seeing both on television and in video games were leading to these violent acts. This is a conversation we've been having for 21 years. And one common refrain through that 21 years is actual medical research that proves that it's just simply not accurate. This goes as far back as 2001, where there was a report from the Surgeon General of the United States at the time, where a lot of research was done to prove whether this was accurate, and the result was in fact that the environment around a child has significantly more to do with whether they are more prone to violence than the media diet that they have, be it things that they have read or things that they have played or things that they have seen. And that research has only continued to be stronger over the last couple of years. That we've seen more and more research called, more studies called for over the last couple of years. It's increased dramatically over the last couple of years as we've seen reports of Fortnite being addictive, as we've seen reports of bullying and hate speech across things like voice communication in games. And that actually is the one part of this that is inconclusive so far, is through things like Xbox Live and PlayStation Online, the kind of constant barrage of insults that you receive, and that can actually be somewhat mentally damaging, but not anywhere near the scale of just being around people that are just straight up hateful and negative.
Now, I wanted to talk about, you shared an anecdote in the piece about playing Mortal Kombat at your local arcade, and then there was a time where a mom was standing kind of in front of the game and said, "No, you can't play this game." And you said that there was a research paper that was discussed on the local news that kind of scared this person and made them think like, "Oh no, we shouldn't have our kids playing this game. I need to talk to their parents." My question for you, do you think that that's where most of these connections come from, is sort of like filtered through local news and headlines, or does it come from parents in the homes watching these games and maybe not understanding it? Basically, I'm wondering where you think that fear that has been around for this 21 years, where has that sprung from?
I think it comes from two places. The first is that we're dealing with the generation that is growing up now is the only generation that has had video games, violent video games, from the beginning of its life until the end of its life, right? Like these games were not around when I was 5 and 6, and so the generation that raised us, they didn't encounter this until significantly later in life. So obviously seeing this kind of radical shift in gameplay, video games, started as kind of Pong and Pac-Man, and then became this kind of violent, aggressive thing. And there was a time where these games, where the game developers were kind of intentionally pushing the boundaries to see how far they would go. There was a period of time where a game called Carmageddon was actually banned in the United States due to this research from violent video games, because there were point modifiers for running people over in the game. But we would kind of, I would not laugh, but we would, the concept of banning a game like that today, in a world where Grand Theft Auto Online is one of the most popular games on the planet, is just not something that would happen now, because of the research that we've done to show that it's just simply not as impactful as kind of the shock value that you get from having seen it from the first time.
Yeah. Now, something that's making the rounds, I saw it on Twitter a couple of days ago, Vox wrote an article about it, I'm sure there have been plenty of other articles about it, is this chart that shows countries ranked by video game revenue paid on a per person basis, sitting right next to a chart that shows violent gun deaths. We actually have that link. Yeah, it's right there. And it's pretty stark what you see there, right? Tell me what you see through your lens. What does this chart illustrate for you? And I think it kind of speaks to exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so there's two things to keep in mind here. One is, there are plenty of countries in the world where video games are played where gun violence is not a thing because guns are not accessible in those areas. But that chart, it's important to kind of take that a step back, right? Because that does not mean that there is no violence in those areas. There are certainly knife violence and things like that, and those can be quite devastating in their own right in those same countries. But it is simply true that gun violence is significantly higher here because guns are more available. And that is something that's just not going to change anytime soon in our country. So that chart is impactful in the way that it highlights two things. One is that games really are played all over the world, but in no place in the world is there a point where the act of playing a game makes you more violent.
Mm-hmm. And that's sort of been the belief, or not the belief, but the researched fact for 21 years. And in fact, that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about next. We've had more than 20 years of studies that continue to show there is, I think you said, the Surgeon General's report back in 2001 showed a small reduction in empathy and potentially an increase in the chances that someone would act aggressively, but that those impacts are very small in comparison. So if we have all of this research out there, why do you think it's still being used to explain violent actions?
It's a really easy crutch, right? Like the people who are listening to this and looking for an answer, but not looking for an answer that leads to kind of immediate action. This is the kind of response that you get. It's not going to end in violent video games being banned because a lot of these places, a lot of the same people who are advocating for this kind of research are looking at those results at the same time that the rest of us are. The conversation around this is frankly a little on the ridiculous side because it's a very common scapegoat, and no new research has ever pointed to this being the case. The point that you made about the increased aggression and kind of the increase in rapid response to things. It's actually kind of fascinating the way that research gets interpreted by different parties. That is also seen as a positive when it comes to reacting in certain situations. For example, people who play more driving video games where they have the steering wheel are frequently found to be better reacting in emergency situations that could otherwise lead to automobile accidents by being able to quickly navigate those situations because they're so used to that kind of twitch environment because they're constantly playing those games. So it is the way that it gets parsed is really kind of fascinating. The way that you said it, which is the way that it is often read, it sounds like someone is becoming more aggressive in a violent way when it really is interpreted by the science community as being more reactionary. Which is very rarely a negative thing in most cases.
Yeah, another context. One study that I found from the American Psychological Association said that it found, quote, scant evidence of a correlation between playing violent games and violent activities. But Dr. Ferguson, who led the committee, said the data on bananas causing suicide is about as conclusive. Literally, the numbers work out to about the same. So which just kind of goes to show, I'm sure there are equal number, of studies that could be inferred or interpreted to mean the other side, right? Like we're kind of caught in this weird world, this nebulous world of studies that contradict each other, and there's no easy answer. There's no easy one thing to point to, which ultimately is what people want. People are looking for that one thing that they can point to, and that's just not going to happen.
Right. And a result of all of this research, as you just pointed out, is that there's a ton of kind of outlier data that can be fished out and read. Another example of that is that in many places in the United States, when a very, very popular game comes out, for a brief period of time, crime and violence actually goes down. For say a 48-hour period, and so the logical conclusion to that, without any other evidence, in that bubble, is that people are too busy playing video games to go out and commit crimes. That's probably not what's actually happening. There's not enough data to actually lean in that way, but it doesn't, stop someone from drawing that conclusion.